Set?
You're good to go. You're recording now.
Okay. So let me wish everyone a good evening and welcome to tonight's Community Board 1 Waterfront Parks and Cultural Committee.
Paul?
Hello, who's that?
It's Andrew. There's a lot of feedback. I don't know if we need to mute everyone, or maybe they already did.
Yeah, I heard some of that feedback. You're taking care of that. Someone else is. Okay, so let's keep going. The person who just spoke is the co-chair of the committee, Andrew Zelter. And I also want to introduce Diana Sweetai, who's our land use director, and she will be assisting and I'm sure chiming in and answering a few questions here and there in the course of the meeting. Okay, we have two items on the agenda, as most of you know. So let's get going. The first item is the proposed move of Charging Bull. I think many of us, if not all of us, are rather familiar with Charging Bull. It's been around for close to over 30 years here in Lower Manhattan, and it's a very popular destination for a lot of tourists, a lot of visitors. We see constantly people taking all kinds of photos there. So, and it has an unusual history that I could briefly go through. The artist who did it, he originally placed it just on his own on Wall Street back in 1989 at the foot of the stock exchange. The city at that time didn't like that. They immediately removed it. And not too long after, there was an agreement to place it where it's been since then at Bowling Green Park. And I'm sure most of you know where that is, all the way down by the Battery, where Broadway sort of comes to an end and meets up with Whitehall. So it's been there ever since. And today we are hearing from the City of New York, which has a proposal to move it to an alternate site closer to Wall Street and the stock exchange. But we will hear more about that. Let me, without further ado, introduce the city's first representative, and that is Ed Pincar. He is the Manhattan Borough Commissioner for the New York City Department of Transportation. So he will tell us all about the proposal, and obviously let's try to let him go through his proposal, and after that I will allow the committee to start asking questions, etc. And then we will of course have the public chime in. Okay, Ed, it's on, you're on.
Thank you so much, Chair Goldstein. I'm going to start by trying to share my screen. Does everyone see, who can see the title screen of Relocation of the Charging Bull? Is that working? It's amazing when technology works. Well, first of all, thank you. Good evening, Chair Goldstein. I see Chair Notaro has joined us as well. Thank you, members of the committee, and ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ed Pincar. I am Manhattan Borough Commissioner for the New York City Department of Transportation, which just is about the best job in city government. First, I hope all of you and your families are doing well during this difficult time. Anthony knows how much I love CB1, and usually in normal days I get to walk the streets downtown for my job, and I haven't been there in 2 months, and it's been very challenging for all of us, but I hope you are staying safe and healthy. Joining me tonight are Jen Leung from my team, as well as Nicholas Pedinati, who comes from our urban design unit. We're also very grateful to be joined by phone by Sergeant Marty Wingert of NYPD's Counterterrorism Division. Thank you very much for inviting us to provide details on the city's application to relocate the charging bull statue from Bowling Green to within the existing security zone on Broad Street, just north of Exchange Place. We plan to bring this proposal to the Public Design Commission next month and look forward to learning the feedback from the committee and later this month, the full board as well. Before I proceed with the presentation, I would like to provide background information on how the city reached the decision to relocate the statue. As we all remember there were two separate terrorist attacks involving motor vehicles in Manhattan in 2017, including along West Street within Community Board 1. The administration at the time established a working group composed of several different agencies to undertake a thorough review of vulnerable areas and develop solutions to protect New Yorkers and those from around the world who visit us. As we will see in the slides, the existing location of the statue is on a very narrow stretch of a traffic triangle north of Bowling Green Park. Like all of you, I've walked past it countless times in my weeks, and oftentimes several times a day. And we'll see some photos of the conditions. The city attempted to install some security infrastructure to contain the very large number of visitors, but still people spilled into Broadway and onto Whitehall Street as they queued for the statue. NYPD, including the Counterterrorism Division, has recommended that the statue be relocated from Bowling Green to a more suitable and secure location. Identifying an alternative site proved a very large task that required the expertise from many different agencies, not only NYPD and DOT, but the fire department, the Department of Environmental Protection, in order to account for emergency service requirements, pedestrian access and flow, and potential underground conflicts with the water, subway, and utility networks. I would like to thank all of my colleagues from those agencies for their assistance with this very important issue. With that short introduction complete, please allow me to proceed through my presentation. The plan involves, obviously here in CB1 in Lower Manhattan. If you see on the left of the screen, we have a shaded dot where the bull rests currently on the tip of Bowling Green, and the proposed relocation site to the west side of Broad Street, north of Exchange Place. I'll have more details on this specific location on this slide, which I think certainly starts to provide the context of where we would like to relocate the bull. So just to orient everybody, again, we're looking to the west side of Broad Street. This would be north of Exchange Place, but south of the existing security fence at the New York Stock Exchange. It will also be south and on the opposite side of the street as to where Fearless Girl is currently stationed. And you'll see in purple, we have depicted where there are a number of grates and manholes and fire hydrants, which really did become one of the more challenging aspects of identifying a potential relocation site. Here's a picture of the statue itself, the iconic charging bull, which, as Chair Goldstein mentioned, was created and installed near the Stock Exchange in 1989 by the artist Arturo Di Modica, weighing just over 7,000 pounds. It is approximately 11 feet by 16 feet and made of bronze. Also, as the chair mentioned, there was controversy when the statue was originally placed and then moved from the Stock Exchange to Bowling Green, where it sits today. The next three slides, I think, really demonstrate the great challenge, not only in security, but also in ensuring safe pedestrian circulation of the bull at its current location. Please note that even with the security infrastructure, visitors are standing in the street. They are walking through the barriers, and even worse, they are sitting on them, including a child here. And I know that was certainly one of my grave concerns every time I walked past it. Since these photos were taken, DOT worked closely with CB1's Transportation Committee, and I see Chair Betty Kay is on the line, to redesign the Whitehall corridor by implementing a shared street. And I think that has definitely helped the overall network. We have further plans for Broadway that we presented to CB1 last year to install a protected bicycle lane, running along the east side of Broadway down towards this area. But certainly we all recognize and can see, just looking at these photos, just how many people are coming to see the iconic bull, but in order to do so are putting themselves at risk because they're just overwhelming the physical space. And again, that's despite the city's best efforts with trying to place some security infrastructure. And again, on this slide, you'll see people walking around the area, past the Jersey barriers, sitting on the Jersey barriers. There was just that much interest in the bull in a very, very tight, constrained area. Here, again, is just showing an aerial view of the proposed location on Broad Street. These 4 photos depict more specifically where the bull can go. You'll note that most of Broad Street is in Eurocobble, the darker material on the screen. The lighter, more granite material is there to depict the historic Broad Street Canal. And that is certainly something that we have been thinking closely about. Here is the drawing that perhaps is of greatest value to us. Just really going through the dimensions, not only of the statue itself, which again is 11 feet by 16 feet, but also where it will be placed. And just to take a moment to talk through this a little bit, obviously we needed to find a suitable location that was away from all of the different underground infrastructure pieces in this area, away from manholes, from vents, from fire hydrants. One of the benefits as to putting it on the same side of the street as where the existing fence rests today is that most of the pedestrian corridor on Broad Street itself obviously happens to the east curb. So the bull in this location would not really impact that north-south pedestrian flow. It has the fundamental benefit of being within the stock exchange security district. So we no longer have to worry about the conflicts between vehicles and pedestrians as we do on Broadway. This is just a fundamentally safer site. And I know when we get to questions, Sergeant Winger may be able to provide some more details on that. But as I mentioned earlier, our sister agencies have reviewed this proposal and are comfortable with it. It meets all of the various technical and engineering requirements for installation. And for DOT's own part, we are confident that safety and the overall experience for pedestrians visiting the statue will be far more improved at this location than it would be as visitors currently have to struggle with the traffic on Broadway. In addition to general feedback from the committee tonight, we would also like to hear specifically whether the committee has a preference on the orientation of the statue we do have some options, or I should say two options, with it, the statue facing either north towards Wall Street, as depicted in this photo, or potentially south towards Exchange Place. In closing, as recommended by the city's security personnel, the department is proposing to relocate the Charging Bull statue in order to provide protections for the millions of people who visit it every year. We believe that the proposed location on Broad Street will provide the best alternative as it rests within the existing security zone and meets all of the various technical requirements. The location will not only provide a better viewing experience for pedestrians, it will also help to improve pedestrian safety and circulation along the Broadway corridor, which has been of primary importance to CB1's Transportation Committee. After hearing your feedback tonight and receiving any comments from the full board, DOT intends to present this proposal to the Public Design Commission on June 15th for their review and approval. Thank you for your time and attention, and I will be happy to try to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Okay, let me just start by asking a question or two. How close is the statue's proposed location? It looks like it's fairly close, excuse me, to the entrance of some buildings. So is that a commercial building that it's close to?
I had moved off the screen. Are you guys now able to see the presentation again? I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, but this probably is, so you don't see what's on the screen at this stage?
I can you?
Yeah.
Okay, but I thought I had messed up. So yes, we do have at 20 Broad Street, we have some ground floor commercial as well as a entrance to a residential building. The statue would not be placed on the sidewalk. It would be placed within the roadway, anywhere from 2.8 to 3.4 feet from the curb. We don't expect there to be any conflicts with the access in and out of the building or those establishments.
Did you make any effort to inform the buildings and especially the residents?
So our kickoff meeting is always at the community board. We have tried to post some information online, but this is really the start of the public outreach process, and we're happy to have conversations with not only the building but the commercial tenants. Obviously, in normal times I would have already walked down there and tried to talk to people, but I wasn't unable to do that at the moment.
And I'm sure you think that this location would enable the building to continue to have deliveries and all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, we know that all vehicular access to this space is managed anyway. There's still going to be plenty of opportunity for that access to happen. We're very confident we can make it work.
Great. All right, let's open it up for committee members to ask questions first. Is that Alice, you want to go?
Oh, I didn't know I asked a question, but I'm always ready to go.
I thought I saw you. Okay.
Yeah, I do have a few questions, which might get answered. Well, I guess this is the end of the presentation. Could we pull up just the picture of the bull? I guess it's very funny that you get a choice whether it's facing the stock exchange or its bum is towards the stock exchange. I guess that depends on your politics. But anyway, I thought that's very funny. Yeah, here we go. So the distance, so Paul has raised a really good point. So I guess, I would really advocate that 20 Broad knows what's going on and has approved this, because boy, that's quite a lot of people in front of one's building. But I just have a couple of questions on the process. It was very unclear to me. And this has been brought up before, that the city, the city, of course, owns the property, but the relocating of the art seems to not be in the purview of the city. I mean, the city can simply say, we want to remove the art, but is the artist, the relationship of the artist and the city's property, is that something that we need to have a better understanding of, just in terms of process at the city level?
City law establishes a procedure by which a city agency can apply to the Public Design Commission in order to locate or relocate pieces of art that are on the property that the agency controls. Obviously, we've worked very closely with the administration, including the law department, to make sure that this was within our rights to do, and we believe it is.
Right. Well, I'm going to leave that for now and hear from other folks, but thank you, Mr. Pincar.
See, Anthony, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, it's really a follow-up question to yours, Paul, and thank you for calling on me. Commissioner Pincar, thank you for presenting. You mentioned that the bull may be in front of 20 or Broad Street, which has some residential. Knowing that this is very popular and tourists will flock to it, have you considered any provisions for protecting the entrance to the residential building?
So we definitely want to think through what type of measures we can put in place to really assist with the queuing that happens. Obviously, our primary focus at the moment is to make sure that the queuing is more safe, occurs more safely than it does today on the very narrow edge of the traffic triangle on Broadway. We're confident that there is a lot of space within the roadbed here on Broad Street. And again, most of that space on the west side of the street isn't really used because of the jut out by the stock exchange fence. So we're comfortable with the amount of space that is there, and we think we'll be able to make it work.
Thank you.
Those metal barriers in the photo are always there?
No, those are certainly not always there. And this is just a graphical overlay.
Okay. That might be good for the residents to have the barriers, but we could talk about that.
Sure.
Let's keep going, and I want to let other people speak. Andrew Zelter.
I just wanted to respond to the question that Ed posed, if there's a view about the bull facing north or south. My own personal view is I like the notion of the bull facing north, so heading towards the stock exchange as opposed to away from it. But again, just a personal view.
We'll note that. Thank you. Okay, let's keep going. I see next on my list is Betty. Betty Kay, are you here? Oh,
You on mute, Betty?
I think it's very important to look at the residents and people who live around the proposed site. But I'd also like to remind people about some of the history of the resolution that was passed in January of this year by CB1. In support of the bikeway that was going in along Broadway and down to Whitehall Street, one of the resolves was that we anticipate judging the proposed project success based on the movement of buses, vehicles, adequate delivery, garbage pickup, and the passage of bicyclists and pedestrians. So if we're going to be consistent, we're going to judge DOT on how well they let people move past the bull on Broadway. We have to consider how much is it fair to keep an obstacle that they're saying is an obstacle to achieving that goal that CB1 has set as the measure of success.
Okay, thank you. And Ed, if you ever want to respond, just let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to just keep going, okay?
Of course.
Okay, next speaker, Elizabeth Lamia. Thank you.
Few concerns. First and foremost, that location, I understand it being within the security zone and the reasons, the positives, but I think some of the negatives include that that is a very highly trafficked tourist area as well as residential. And I think we're underplaying how congested that area gets, especially in when the weather gets nicer and when tourists are returning to the area. I really would emphasize the outreach to the public because there are a number of residential as well as commercial buildings surrounding that area. I also don't think aesthetically that the bowl fits in that space. I mean, the beauty of where it is now in that triangle aesthetically really works quite nicely. And I'm wondering to what extent the artist has been put into the equation in terms of getting input from the artist as to the movement. It seems like that would be something that would be appropriate. And I'd like to hear as to what type of outreach was done with respect to the artist as well.
Elizabeth, thank you for your comments. Yes, it's a very heavily trafficked area as it stands today, not only by tourists, but by residents and those going to and from transit to their office buildings.
Right.
I know myself, I walk down this corridor, up and down this corridor multiple times during a given day. We did see a little bit through the placement of Fearless Girl. There was a lot of concern that that space was just going to be overrun on the east side of Broad, and that really, hasn't come to pass. This is going to be in a little bit of a different area because, again, it's kind of within what would otherwise be a jut out. So we're very confident that the street itself, which does not see much vehicular traffic, all of which has to be local access and pre-approved, we just think that there's enough space for all of it to happen. And certainly I think there would be a period of time when we're observing patterns of tourists and we might have to consider whether we put up signage or other measures to help people queue in the most orderly fashion. But it's far superior in our mind to where it exists today. I should also mention that aesthetics of the proposal will be judged by the Public Design Commission. It's one of their primary functions. The commission itself is composed with expert artists, and we are certainly looking forward to obtaining their feedback on the proposal, not only about location, but about orientation and about many of the other elements that you cite. So, I thank you for your questions. I think you're 100% right. I think we are going to get some ideas and questions from the Design Commission, and that's one of the reasons why we're here tonight with you, because before we go to PDC, we first seek the input from the local community.
Right. Well, I would like to add with respect to Fearless Girl, that certainly has not become the global icon that the Charging Bull is. I mean, that's a destination. Tourists from all around the world, they're coming to Manhattan. They know it's at the foot of Broadway, looking up toward what the city became. It's really become quite an iconic location in and of itself. Whereas Fearless Girl, people just don't know that she was moved there. And it's during the pandemic. How long ago was she moved to that location? I don't think it's been that long. So I don't think it's really been tested in terms of the foot traffic as a destination. But I do have some concerns, and I think outreach really needs to happen before you make this decision.
Paul?
Yeah, who's that? Let me just add that I know you asked about the artist and has he been consulted. My understanding is that I don't know how much he's been consulted, but he apparently is on record strongly opposing this move. You'll be hearing from his representative a little later on when we finish this question round. Okay.
My understanding as well.
Paul?
Let me keep going and call on speakers. Laura Starr.
Thank you. And so I agree with everything Elizabeth just said. And also, I'm not surprised that the artist had that reaction. Ed, just for the record, I'm a landscape architect. I've been doing public landscape architectural work for 30 or 40 years. I was the head landscape architect in Central Park. And I think that the bull belongs where it is with that leafy background of the park behind it. I think the fact that you guys don't know which way to face the bull means this is just like there's no context for it here. It's like in the middle of no man's land. It's really ugly. And no, it is, and downtown, Lower Manhattan gets millions of visitors a year. It's a world capital, and we should be trying to make it beautiful. And where it is now, with some, good design and traffic calming and the other type of urban furniture that can happen there, you can solve the crowd problem. And, it's time that this, especially with this COVID, it's time to rethink how our streets are used and how they look. And so I'm just seconding Elizabeth and saying, I don't think this is at all a good location. Also, I work on Broad Street and it is very crowded here already. It's a complete no man's land. It's total chaos right here. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's keep going then. The next speaker, Mark Amoruso.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, Elizabeth hit a lot of the points there. Just maybe reiterate briefly. I'm a little bit miffed and disturbed that the residents of this location, this relocation location, weren't consulted to at least be able to chime in today to give us more guidance on their feelings about it. And I agree with what most of the last two speakers said. It is in an iconic location. Here, it'll go from the charging bull to the lost bull. I mean, he just looks like he's doesn't know what to do. Do I go left, right, north, south? So it's just it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit there. The location now, as mentioned, is iconic. With a little tweaking, I'm sure we can figure out some way to make it safe for pedestrians over there. And with regards to if I'm picking the Charging Bull, an icon of New York, or some more icons, I think the Charging Bull should win that match. That's all I got for now.
Okay. Joe, I see you fidgeting. Does that mean you want to try to talk? Okay, let's unmute Joe and let him have his word. Diana, you want to take care of that? Thank you.
Okay.
You're on. Go, Joe.
So first of all, the guy representing the Department of Transportation never mentioned the artist. And thank you for telling us that he does not like to move the artwork. And to give a little history, when the bull first came down to Lower Manhattan, the city administration, all these agencies, nobody liked it. And so in the middle of the night, they moved it to here, where it is now, and it became an overnight sensation. And the city has never proactive on that bull. So number two, it seems to me before you come to the community board, we as a community board should know what the residents think of the what you're doing. And to put them last is not the way the community works. We want to hear what the residents have to say so we can take it within ourselves what they think. You talk about queuing. There's no problem at the bull about lining up or taking the picture or where the people stand. It's one of the best places to be because people respect one another unbelievably. And now you want to put that bike lane because the commission loves bikes and doesn't care about other things? That's worse than moving the bull, in my opinion. Now, also, how far is the new spot from where it originally was?
Originally, as in before it got pushed to Bowling Green.
Yes,
We don't have the exact placement of where
approximately.
it's very close to where it was.
Oh, yes, and that was my point. It was very close to where you want to put it now. And the city made a move away from that spot. So now they want to move it back without consulting the residents or anyone else. I think you people have gone the wrong way about it. Elizabeth hit the nail on the head, and I think you guys should go back and consider what the people at Community Board 1 says and not take your executive action. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair,
Okay.
can I respond to that?
Go ahead.
Thank you very much. So just a couple of things. First of all, on process, and I know this is the first time that I've presented to the Waterfront Park and Cultural Committee. Obviously, most of our interaction occurs with the Transportation Committee. We always begin any proposal with a formal presentation to the Community Board. The bull is not, the statute would not be moved tomorrow. We still have, processes to go through with the Public Design Commission, which itself involves the opportunity for public to comment. And we will certainly follow up and engage with some of the more local stakeholders when we are able to do so. And that's part of our routine business.
Just one thing before I vote no. Normally, the community is informed of when the meeting takes place, where this is going to be discussed, and then the community comes down and interacts with the community board. And that's the way it should be, not after we meet. Thank you.
So again, Joe, I'm sorry, that's just not how the process works regularly. We do post information.
I don't want to get into.
I don't want to continue this back and forth.
At any rate,
You made your point, Joe.
over the street networks that existed 30 years ago are very different than how they exist today. And I do, while hearing some of the criticisms of the proposal and understanding that, from an aesthetic standpoint, some may feel the bull works better in Bowling Green. I do disagree, and I think many others will, that it is working from a functional standpoint today. The queuing of tourists absolutely poses a problem and safety problem for themselves and for others on the corridor. If we go back, and these are just some of the photos that we see and have seen, oftentimes had people just waiting in Broadway or on Whitehall. And I do believe that Sergeant Wingert from NYPD Counterterrorism may be on the phone. Diana, if I could ask you to unmute Sergeant Wingert, he might just be able to provide a little bit more color on the evaluation that NYPD undertook while looking at this issue.
Okay, give me one moment.
This guy is using the American flag, everything. Shit.
Okay, I've unmuted a handful of call-in users. Are they able to speak? Did we get them?
Hi, this is Sergeant Wingert from NYPD Terrorism.
Okay, you're on. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for allowing us to be part of your presentation tonight. The NYPD, we spend a lot of time in and around Community Board 1. It's probably the finest spots within the city. And as you all know, you don't need me to be telling you about how popular the bull is at its current location. It's just the way that the street is configured right now. The bull and its location really does pose a significant safety hazard. And that it's too popular for its current location. And we see, some of the pictures that were shown in this presentation are small in terms of what we've seen at its worst case scenario, where crowds of people spill into both Broadway and Bowling Green, and it's a safety hazard for the people trying to capture, just that perfect shot of the bull in Manhattan. While buses and taxis and other vehicles are trying to make their way down Broadway and Whitehall. It really, if there was a better spot, someplace that it was out of the stream of traffic, it would be ideal. So similar to other locations in the city, we've come up with trying to create a protective envelope around the bull. We've used Jersey barriers. We've used our concrete block. We've tried to make it look aesthetically pleasing. DOT's replaced our block and Jersey barriers with the granite block. But really, that location is it's an accident waiting to happen. We're really just trying to find a better spot for it where everyone can be at peace and can enjoy it as much as they can without having to worry about some sort of accident or intentional act.
Okay, Sergeant, is that it for now?
That's it for now, but I'm here if you have any more questions.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Okay, let's keep going. There are several more members who have asked to speak. Let's go to Tammy Meltzer next.
Good evening, and Commissioner Pincar, and thank you very much for coming and discussing this. I had a question in terms of the bull itself. Was there ever an option when we're looking at the redesign of Whitehall of taking a look at the bottom at where the bull is at the apex of that triangle? The back of the triangle is right along the Bowling Green Park itself. Was there any dialogue or consideration or look at moving the bull literally back 200 feet where the triangle widens significantly and perhaps opening the back of Bowling Green Park so it becomes seamless with the triangle as a way to not only beautify the cobblestone area, but provide a better and safer location for the bull while retaining its presence?
Tammy, that's a great question. I do know that we, scoured, available options that again took into account all of the other potential conflicts. I can't say precisely your location was evaluated, but I'm happy to go back and ask our colleagues on the Security Infrastructure Committee as well as with the Parks Department to see what the challenges at that site might have been.
It would have been interesting, potentially to see a way to reimagine Bowling Green Park to be able to connect the entire area. I mean, my concerns obviously is this will be just a giant cobblestone area that potentially, once the barricades and other things are removed, becomes a place that is now in a parking lot for delivery trucks or placards or other things, instead of being able to incorporate the bill potentially in opening up to green the entire space and extending Bowling Green Park to the apex of where the bull is now, and really having it be a larger, greener swath. So if there's any option for consideration to that, then that would be a win-win for everything.
I hear you. I think, I can certainly see why you and others might think it a logical site. My recollection, and it's been a little bit of a while now, was that there were some utility conflicts at that location, but we can certainly clarify and follow up with you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for helping to have the dialogue.
Of course, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Let's go to Michael Francoeur.
Hey, great. Thanks, Paul. I just wanted to say I had a comment and a question. I think my comment is, well, one thing I wanted to say is I know that bike lanes have been kind of discussed here, and I wanted to say from at least a transportation committee perspective, we have not ever had a conversation about, hey, bike lanes or the bull, and that's not really what I'm hearing from the NYPD or Ed tonight. It seems like the main concern is around buses, trucks, and motor vehicles and the pedestrians in the street bed. So I just wanted to say that. I also wanted to say, in an ideal world, my preference would be to keep the bull in its current location, and I would love, as Laura mentioned, a more, if we could be more creative in the way that we think about how our streets are used and how we can make them safe for people, especially given how pedestrian heavy that bottom bit of Broadway is, and given that we do have shared street implementation on Whitehall on the east side of Bowling Green and the Bull. And so I don't know if there's any consideration to pedestrianizing that or leveraging that to a greater extent to enable tourists and pedestrians to queue for their photos on the Bull. But I do completely understand the security concerns. So that's my comment. My question is, if the Bull does end up on the stock or by the stock exchange, has there been any consideration or ability to deliberate over the footprint of the black fence that goes around the stock exchange? Because that does have a significant footprint, and it does kind of, I think, like Elizabeth said, and actually others have noted, it's a pretty crowded area with Federal Hall and the stock exchange there, and the tourists do crowd there. And I know if we could decrease if it's possible to decrease the footprint of that that metal gate, that would definitely allow for more room.
Michael, thank you for your comments. To your second question or second point in question, I do know that the Stock Exchange, Downtown Alliance, and others have presented a vision for a more fundamental redesign of Broad Street, Wall Street, and the overall area. My understanding is the existing security fencing is required in place. But that, should there be a future project to change some of that and otherwise incorporate security elements into a redesign, that it could be possible to change the dimensions. So that's certainly an idea that's been out there in the public for a while now. And as always, the challenge becomes securing funding over time.
Sure, got it. Thanks, Ed.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see. Mimi Flynn.
Thanks, Paul. I have a comment. I used to, and I have a question also. I've worked at several offices on Broad over many years, and I've always gotten asked by tourists where the Bull is, because it just always seemed to occur to tourists that it would be closer to the exchange. So it's just a comment. I'm just sort of here as a sightseer in a sense. But if the Bull was to move in the proposed location, what does that mean for the Christmas tree that goes up on Broad Street around the hall?
Mimi, that's a great question. I'm sure my colleagues have thought of that. I have not, but I'm happy to bring that back and try to get an update on the thinking.
Okay.
Did we see a slide with the Christmas tree on it? I thought for a second we saw a slide with it. It flashed quickly.
So
look at that.
Slide.
You can't forget that slide, right?
That stuck out. That's how I remembered it.
Okay, thank you. Let's keep going. We still have, I have two more committee members to speak, and then we will have some public speakers. Let's go to Richard Korman.
Yes, hi. Thanks for the presentation. I have a couple of comments and a question. First comments are that I definitely support a lot of what we've heard about being a lot more creative and exploring ways to keep it in the current location and improve the traffic patterns around that. I think we could do a lot more than what we've seen so far in this presentation. And there is some concern for sure about the ability of the artist and the role of the artist in making a decision around whether this moves or not. I know people that know the artist and know that the artist objects and is quite litigious. And I hate to see the city in a situation where we waste time and money over a lawsuit that might be unnecessary. And my question is that I'm not really clear what the reason for moving it is. I know you've said terrorism, I know you've said security, an accident waiting to happen, but have accidents happened there? And what exactly is the terrorism concern? People gather all over the parks and downtown, and certainly where you're going to be placing the, or wanting to place the bull. I don't understand the terrorism issue or security issue at all.
Richard, thank you for your comments and questions. I'm not sure if Marty Wingert is still on the phone. If so, maybe we can unmute him again. But you know, the security concern is anytime you have a large number of people congregating in one area, and you're unable to provide appropriate protection, then you do run the risk of a motor vehicle attack, as we saw on 7th Avenue, as we saw on West Street. The concern being, you know, not necessarily that there would just be a quote unquote accident in everyday, you know, vehicular travel, but a deliberate attempt to run down dozens and hundreds of people. And, you know, that is definitely something that we, you know, at DOT, at NYPD, and throughout the city have been thinking long and hard about how it does. You know, it's an iconic location for sure. It's an iconic statue and view, which might actually even add to the desire to have an attack there. And that's certainly, you know, some of the things that NYPD counterterrorism has expressed when, you know, undertaking its evaluation of, you know, to what extent the city is able to protect New Yorkers and visitors at that spot. I do, and again, you know, I'm down there all the time. I've personally seen, not from a terrorist perspective, just from an everyday travel perspective, really close calls with how people walk through and stand around that site. So I'm a little surprised to hear some of the feedback from this committee that you haven't seen that happen on a daily basis, because I certainly have. And, you know, we've definitely invested time and resources as to seeing what is possible, how we might be able to reconfigure the streets. We implemented a shared street design, but it doesn't really get to the heart of the matter of the goal being at the tip of the median, adjacent to two streets. And again, you know, I heard Hammy loud and clear about why not just move the bull back. That was definitely something that we looked at, and there was some additional complications involved. Diana, I do know that the sergeant is still on. I'm not sure if he was unmuted, but if we could do that, that would be great.
I would just make one comment about that in terms of terrorism. I think we need to be careful about when we use the term terrorism and not use it so freely. People gather, this is New York City, people gather in crowds all over the city. Every place, every street corner could be a target for terrorism. I don't think, if your concern is safety, pedestrian safety, we can have that discussion, but I think terrorism gets thrown in here really, truly unnecessarily and inappropriately from what you've described so far.
All right, Sergeant, do you want to respond, or are you okay?
No, I think it's a fair question, and but I think the response is pretty straightforward. What we look to do is there are numerous locations in the city that have a high density of pedestrian activity, and we look to protect the areas that kind of meet three criteria. We look for areas that have a very high dense pedestrian capacity, that are associated with an iconic structure or national monument, and then those that have had past terrorist threats or attacks on in the past. The symbolism of the charging bull is basically a symbol of the American economy, which is one of the reasons and one of the motivating reasons for the attacks on 9/11 and other attacks since then in the United States and abroad on American infrastructure. So the fact that the charging bull, it's not just a statue, it's a pretty significant statue for people that don't like it. our main interest with this location, right? It's an iconic location, it's an iconic spot, it's a symbolic statue, but it's also in a highly dense area where there's no controls for vehicle safety. So at a minimum, from a pure pedestrian safety point of view, it's a poor spot. And if the argument is that it hasn't really been that unsafe yet, we've identified this as being unsafe. It's a poor spot for having this many people to congregate in and about a street, a busy intersection. If an accident does happen on that spot, we can see this is just a poor location. So.
Okay, thank you.
And we don't, and so we don't throw around terrorism as an easy one, but I think this is just from a plain pedestrian safety point of view. This is pretty simple.
Okay. I believe we have just one more community board member who wanted to say something, and that is Rosa Chang. And as I said, welcome, Rosa, a new member of this committee and of the community board.
Thank you
And
very
also
much.
after
Paul.
Rosa, Susan Cole has requested to speak.
Okay, sorry, Susan. Yes.
Thank you very much, Paul. So I agree 100% that it is a safety hazard in its current location that absolutely needs to be addressed. So I'm glad that we are doing that now. Every time that I have passed by there, whether it be as a pedestrian or in a vehicle, I've seen tourists sort of spilling past the barriers and thinking, oh my God, something horrible is going to happen. But I also think that the proposed location at Wall Street just further would concentrate a huge tourist presence in an area that already is completely inundated, as Elizabeth said earlier. And I like the idea of the fact that downtown there's almost like a tourist loop. There's a path of landmarks and places where they go visit, and I think that that's very helpful to the life of the street that happens down here, and that the Bull being in its current location actually sort of spreads that around and is helpful towards the businesses and the retail and the life on the street, as it were, once they're able to find it. And so the question is addressing the safety concerns for the pedestrians while also perhaps not densifying the tourist presence directly in front of the stock exchange. Little side note, I noticed, Ed, on your plan, and that where you had the Bull located was at, I believe, at 2.8 feet from the sidewalk edge, which, yes, you just passed that, yes, or 3.4 feet, which seems to me a very strong tripping hazard for a lot of pedestrians, like a lot of tourists that are sort of looking at what they're taking pictures of and not necessarily looking at the street or that they're standing on. I could just see so many of them tripping right over that while they're, trying to take a selfie or whatever. And so I don't think that location so close to the sidewalk makes sense. And it's also conflicting with the photoshopped image that you had, where I believe it was more in the sort of light gray zone, which would be sort of centered on the street rather than off to one side. So I think that plan location to me is hazardous actually to the tourists as well, frankly. I really loved Tammy's suggestion of moving it south, because I do feel like that park is underutilized, and that park and the Bull could have a great, strong connection and also provide a lot more safe space for the tourists to sort of congregate around the Bull and take their photos and whatnot. And last thought was also that the Whitehall Street, or the street just to the east where Broadway sort of forks off, every single time I've been there, I've never really seen much vehicular traffic there. And it seems like such an opportunity to take something that's completely underutilized for what it is and do something amazing with it and create a better public experience and space that would make this, sort of tie in with the park, tie in with the Bull, moved further south to a wider expanse, and create a real moment in the city that celebrates it, that celebrates the park, and doesn't just concentrate all of this tourist energy and attention into a spot that already has more than it needs, frankly. So I'm really happy that we're having this discussion. I think it's a great one to have. And I do think that safety is absolutely important to address, but I feel like it could be addressed a little bit closer to where it is right now. And that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I see we do have several other committee members or board members that want to speak. Members of the public, as I said, you will be heard, so hang in there. Susan Cole is next up. She has to be, her mic has to be turned on.
Isn't.
Okay.
Go ahead, Susan.
Thank you very much. I think Rosa and Tammy's suggestion about moving it south is fabulous. I agree with Laura and Megan. I don't want to go on and on. I walk those streets, both of them, daily. It is a poor choice to put it Nassau, where you want to put it, and there's going to be a whole new subway station, subway platform there with an elevator. It's going to be just too congested. This space, Whitehall, really they spill into Whitehall. They don't spill into Broadway because the street splits. The buses go down on Broadway. They do not go down on Whitehall. And I think you just haven't done your job well enough. And that's all I have to say.
Okay. Let's keep going then. We have next up Francis Curtis.
No comment. Everybody said everything I was feeling.
All right, very good. And then in that case, let's go to Mariama James.
Thank you, Paul. My question is about the money. Now, while safety is always a priority, my question is, how much of a priority is this move in consideration of the growing budget deficits in the city? I'm presuming the city is paying for this since this is a New York City DOT presentation, so taxpayer money. We keep hearing about all the cuts to the budget, the city budget, and they're going to continue to grow as long as COVID pandemic continues. So how, in that respect, how much of a priority is this? In the 18 years since 9/11, has there ever been an accident in this area? I mean, this preemptive move in consideration of a potential accident that might not ever happen and hasn't happened in 2 decades, to my knowledge, seems a little, I don't know, like something that should be done when you got more money in your pockets than we have right now.
Mariama, thank you for your comments. This is not a financial issue to the city; it's a safety issue. However, the relocation costs would be borne by private partners and not with city tax dollars should the relocation move forward.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. That's comforting. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so with that, are there any other members of the committee who have not been heard who want to speak? Oh, Alice wanted to say something. I'm sorry.
I just had one question, Commissioner. I just wanted to know, how many other alternative places did you consider for this relocation?
There was a laundry list. I do know that we focused at other spots within and around Bowling Green because it is, again, a logical and natural desire to just try to get the bull further south. I'm pulling up just Street View on my second laptop screen, and even from that view, you'll see a number of utility conflicts, manhole covers that were, the reason it was unable simply to be moved south. And we looked certainly within the stock exchange security zone, again, because if we moved the bull from one location where we feel that the street network presents safety issues to another similar location, we wouldn't be addressing the problem. The real benefit in our eyes to moving it to Broad Street is the managed vehicular access. Although we have high pedestrian volumes, we have very low chance of vehicular conflict with pedestrians, and that certainly strengthens the safety argument of the proposal. But I certainly hear from you and your fellow members of the committee, and I'll take that important feedback back.
Yeah, I was just asking the question, would you be able to share with the community or the committee what these places were? Because I think a little more definition as to how you came up with this would be helpful. And given that I assume there's no urgency here in terms of the timing of relocating this, particularly in light of the fact that we probably won't see tourists in this location or any other for a while, could we sort of maybe reconsider? I think some tremendous points were raised. I couldn't agree more with Rosa Chang on the very wedged in quality of the location you have, with a 2 to 3 foot space between the sidewalk and all in front of a residential building that makes the, of course, iconic bull look like it belongs there. All these questions are really worthy of a little more reflection and potential revision. Is there some room for more input and looking at some alternatives, or is this somewhat of a fait accompli?
Again, we're here tonight as the start of the conversation, and definitely my team and I are taking thorough notes, and we're going to report back not only to our colleagues but to our sister agencies on what we're hearing and seeing in what ways we're able to respond. There's difficulty in trying to show some of the graphics because it's not an 11 by 16 box. So I certainly hear Rosa's point that, if it's 2.8 feet away from the curb, you're going to create some potential tripping hazards. But even looking at this aerial view of the bull in its existing standpoint, you'll see it's not a square. And we were very confident as to where that would work. But it's fair questions, and we're going to go back with our team and our colleagues and work through some of these.
I'm glad to hear that. That's great. Thanks very much.
Yes, thank you. Okay. At this point, did I miss any other members of the community board who want to speak? Obviously, we will have a wrap-up discussion to see how we want to move forward on this. But are we ready for the public?
Paul, I have a quick question. Can you hear me?
Okay, go ahead.
I feel like you buried the lead with the private donor comment. Would we know who these donors are and what their motivation is? Is that something that we would be able to learn about?
Ed, do you want to say who the private donors are?
We're in contact with the New York Stock Exchange, and the motivation is again, understanding the city's budget is not in great shape even before the crisis. Are we able to make a really good improvement for Lower Manhattan and the overall Stock Exchange district by relocating the bull?
Okay, good. Thank you. All right, so at this stage of the meeting, I want to give a couple of speakers who've been very outspoken and played a real leadership role in terms of the Bowling Green area. One is Art Piccolo, who's been around Community Board 1 for years, and he is in charge of the Bowling Green Association. I will allow him to introduce himself, and we said we would give him 10 minutes to present some counter arguments, although Art, at this point, maybe some of your arguments have already been made. But in any event, after that, we'll also hear from Todd Fine, who's another local resident who has some thoughts on this that he'd like to share. And then we will have a few other public speakers. So, Art, are you ready to go?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we could hear you.
I have a brief presentation, but before that, I want to address a couple of points. First of all, I will be sending you my full analysis of the list of lies I believe you heard tonight from a New York City commissioner. But in answer to 2 points, Elizabeth asked him the question about Arturo Di Modica. The commissioner knows full well and has the letter, which Diana can put up for you, from February, where he emphatically rejects moving the charging bull away from Bowling Green. Second of all, although it finally came out, the private donor was announced by the mayor's office back in November is New York Stock Exchange, right? He was coy about wanting to even mention it, but it's absolutely the New York Stock Exchange. The largest issue of all, which Ed did not address, is the fact that the city has no right legally under the city charter to move Charging Bull to another location. The city does not own Charging Bull. The city only has the right to make decisions to move a work of art from one location to another without the artist's permission if it in fact owns it. But let me get to my presentation, and then Diana has a very brief 2-minute video that I produced that basically I think is also illustrative. Let me make my statement, if I may, members of the board. We are witnessing a truly bizarre situation at this meeting this evening by any logical, ethical, moral, legal, or fair standards. This community should be upholding tonight more than ever its integrity. Tonight is a seminal moment in the history of Community Board Number 1. Arturo Di Modica's world famous iconic Charging Bull has stood at Bowling Green since December 20, 1989. Now almost 30 and 1/2 years, continuously in the same place he was placed back on December 20th, 1989. In all that time, there has not been one single vehicle accident involving Charging Bull. There has not been one single visitor injured at Charging Bull. There could not be a better recommendation for Bowling Green than this kind of 30-year incredible success process. By the way, I hope the sergeant is still on the line. I'm talking about the security issues about the bull. I don't have to be a security expert to know that the New York Stock Exchange is surrounded by all kinds of barriers because of the worry about terrorist threats. There could not be a worse place to place Charging Bull than right next to the New York Stock Exchange, and terrorist wackos who could not get inside to the building with a crowd surrounding Charging Bull right outside of the New York Stock Exchange. And most terrorists do not use cars. They have backpacks, they have bombs strapped. So Sergeant, I will make a point of getting in touch with your superiors and finding out why you didn't consider the terrorist concerns of placing Charging Bull right near the New York Stock Exchange. But anyway, Charging Bull has been here during the administration of 5 New York City mayors, beginning with Mayor Koch, who personally approved bringing Charging Bull to Bowling Green, followed by Mayor Dinkins, then Mayor Giuliani, then Mayor Bloomberg, and now Mayor de Blasio. These first 4 mayors, and for 24 years, never once did any of them try to remove Charging Bull from Bowling Green, for the very good reason Charging Bull is perfect here at Bowling Green, as millions who visit here from all over the world have proven. It is only the current mayor who is and has made various attempts to remove Charging Bull in complete defiance of any legal right to move Charging Bull elsewhere, and without any concern for the artist Arturo Di Modica, who made Charging Bull as a gift to Bowling Green. This is the same Bill de Blasio who did something no other mayor has ever done to any artist or their work, allowing a huge corporation, State Street Global Advisors, to use Charging Bull as a marketing gimmick, doing so without following any guidelines for issuing such a permit and without coming to Community Board Number 1, and in complete secrecy without the knowledge of Arturo Di Modica at all. This is the same unethical Mayor Bill de Blasio who has now sent a DOT representative here tonight to lie to you, to get you to pass a resolution providing him illegal cover for moving Charging Bull to the New York Stock Exchange. Its chairman and owner, Georgia Republican, very bigwig and major national Republican Party contributor, Jeffrey Sprecher, now under investigation for illegal insider trading and illegally profiting from COVID-19 by using confidential information supplied him by his Georgia Republican U.S. Senator wife, Kelly Loeffler. And who is going to pay to move Charging Bull to NYC if de Blasio ever got his way with this illegal scheme? No other than New York Stock Exchange chairman, the above mentioned Jeffrey Sprecher, who may well end up in jail when all is said and done. Charging Bull is not on trial tonight. The unethical friend of the rich and powerful, our mayor is. The committee should make the ethical, proper decision to reject a request from City Hall to support an illegal action by Mayor de Blasio. I have asked, Arturo has asked, plenty of other people have asked. Simple. Give us the documents that prove the legal right for the city to move a work of art that it does not own to another location. There is no such legal right. And the Public Design Commission's own rules and the charter itself, which you can all reference, absolutely. The Public Design Commission can only make decisions about works of art and their placement that are owned by the city of New York. Todd Flynn will have more to say, but Diana, if you play the short video, which begins with, it's very short, begins with a satirical impression by me of what's going on tonight, followed by some real footage of what takes place at Charging Bull for 30 years, this incredible, wonderful scene, unique in New York.
Yes, give me one moment. Let me pull it up here.
Well, you didn't start at the very beginning, Diana.
Okay, here we go.
Voice isn't on. No voice. Oh, it's me.
Diana, could you get the audio working?
The audio is playing on my end. It's not coming through on the other end?
I can't hear the audio now.
Okay, well, it's playing on my end, so I'm not sure how to share the audio, but we did share all of the materials, including the video, with committee members, and if it's not working now, then anybody who's interested can message me and we can share it and include it in the meeting materials that will go up after.
Diane, if the video is coming out on your end, can you replay it, put the volume up, and leave?
I was doing that.
Okay, all right. Okay.
So you don't think you could get the audio working?
Let me try one more thing. And thank you, everybody, for your patience.
No, thank you.
We have a lot of work left to do, so let's get to work. Is it working now?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Earlier this year, the FBI announced to the world that they'd made a significant breakthrough in the Jeff Kelly is the agent in charge of the investigation.
It caused the inevitable question from the press, which is, well, who did it?
There are no immediate plans to arrest their suspects.
Say that.
But, I mean, they're not in jail, right?
I can't say about where they are.
They know who did it, but won't say who.
In this case, we've never been closer on the trail than we are right now.
But to say things like, we're closer than we've ever been, and the case is solved.
Yes, absolutely, but it's the ultimate whodunit.
Well, not least because it's the ultimate whodunit, but according to you, you know who did it, but it's still not solved.
Well, whodunit sounds better than where is it?
Diana, this is Wendy.
Okay, I guess we're done with the film. Thank you. Wendy, make it quick so we could move on to the other speakers, please. Hello?
Video.
What? I can't hear you. All right.
Yeah. Sorry about that. I couldn't unmute for a second. I was just saying the video was very glitchy and maybe we could send it out later. That's it.
Oh, okay. Diana, you could handle that. I think, okay, let's keep going. Okay, Art, thank you for your presentation. So let's move along to Todd Fine. Todd, why don't you get ready to speak? And I'm sorry, I don't have your title in front of me. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Pause,
Tell us
Mark.
who you are
Can you
and
just,
what-
Paul, can you just instruct the members to withdraw their hand raised up so we start over? A lot of them still have them up. They left them there before we continue.
All right, well, you did so. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, so,
Yes, can you hear me?
yeah, Todd, you're.
I think, Paul, you have to lower the hands because I can't seem to lower mine.
Okay, Diana, maybe you could take care of that.
I will work on that.
Okay, but keep going.
Okay, you can hear me.
We can.
Yes. Hi, my name is Todd Fine. I'm the president of the Washington Street Advocacy Group. Some people may know me that I do preservation work on the Little Syria neighborhood, and I've been active in a lot of public art issues around the city. And I've been very concerned about the way that this administration has been politicizing art and using public art as a way to achieve other objectives, and really neglecting aesthetics and history and thoughtfulness in this kind of monument mania that we're in. And I'm very hopeful at the comments tonight. I'm hoping that this is a turning point when the DOT can go back to the drawing board, reevaluate this whole idea. This presentation to me seemed very incomplete and uninspired, and there's absolutely no reason to vote to recommend this to the Design Commission tonight. That would eliminate any leverage that you would have about trying to achieve any potential changes to it. The DOT is within their rights to present it and create these final changes. What direction will it face, whatever they want, and they could go back and approve it to you. So I would highly, say that you have no reason that you would need to recommend this approval tonight. There's absolutely no reason, but I'm thankful that most of the members seem like they don't support it as is. Secondly, I'd like to say that I think it is outrageous that there was total disrespect to Community Board 1 and community advocates in not giving information ahead of time and not having any dialogue about possibilities here. It's what led to this kind of lazy and inferior result. And third, I was kind of horrified that this question of ownership was dealt with so cavalierly. As I said, I'm a historian who studies public art, and I've read many books about New York City public art, and they often mention how Charging Bull is an anomaly. It is one of the only works of art in a city park that the city does not own. And people received the memo that I wrote, and if you haven't, I will send it to you, that shows first that there was never any contract as customary with contemporary works of art. So there's no contract giving ownership or donating it to the city. Second, there was never any PDC approval, which the city charter requires for permanent public art. Third, the city doesn't do repairs to the work. The artist does them himself. Fourth, as you can see, the Parks Department is not even here talking about the dissolution of their property, supposedly. So they're essentially conceding that they don't own it. And fifth, the fact that the New York Stock Exchange is paying for it is an implicit concession that this has to operate extra legally and can't operate with the normal DOT and parks channel. So that said, with the fact that the city doesn't own it and all experts in public art agree, the artist is within his rights to not allow this. And you will probably have a big disaster scandal and another farce like you did with Fearless Girl, another thing. Yeah, I'm not saying that was, whatever your thoughts on that, you will just have another farce in the pandemic, in the middle of the pandemic, an embarrassment to the mayor. And this would just be a joke. And it shows that New York City, this whole idea of terrorism, we have to move it because of terrorism. We have to move it because it's success. That this is what the DOT and the NYPD were saying. No great city around the world would eliminate and alter one of its most successful symbols kind of cavalierly and without much thought, simply because of its success. They would work to figure out the types of solutions that the community board members are thankfully proposing. And I think that's the way that we should operate in a democratic fashion and be confident in ourselves. This terrorism risk will probably only increase if you have a public object in front of the Charging Bull. And if you look through my report, a lot of it details about how it's unnecessary to overtly tie Charging Bull to the stock exchange. There's already some ambiguity about what exactly Charging Bull represents, whether it represents the strength of New York, the strength of the country. People see it as the stock exchange, but it's now had 30 years at Bowling Green where it's taken on a variance of meanings. My report details a lot of aesthetic reasons based on perspective, angles, the flanking buildings, the nature of Broadway and its connection to the history of the city, the natural atmosphere of Bowling Green, the cobblestones under the bowl. All of these factors in my report detail the vast superiority of Charging Bull at Bowling Green. And that's in contrast to a very lazy presentation by DOT that provided no real aesthetic argument for why it should be moved. They don't even have any preference about what direction it faces, whether it's in the middle of the street or close to the city MD, healthcare unit, and in front of 20 Broadway, which is not a particularly attractive building. And it basically seems like it will become a marketing gimmick for the New York Stock Exchange, which is paying for it. And that is really a tragedy for a great city to turn its works of art. It symbolizes a lot of problems that we have in our city with government capture by the financial interests. And to do this, especially in the pandemic, I think would be a great embarrassment to the city. And my report actually deals with a lot of symbolic reasons why this might have harm in the city's reputation into the future and why it's really criminal, especially to the artist, who this is his life achievement. This is something that he is, he's famous for, that he is really, this is a remarkable achievement. It's probably one of the most popular sculptures in the world. So to do something like this without working with him, without trying to reach some agreement and understanding, I think is really absurd. And I'm hopeful that we can use the community board sentiment to vastly improve whatever is happening here. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to go to the remainder of the public speakers. At this point, we're going to try to limit you to approximately 2 minutes each. So let's start with Linda Gerstmann.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. So a lot has been said about 20 Broad Street being right in front of it. Just so you know, 15 Broad Street, which was one of the pioneers of the downtown residential movement, is also right there. And no one came to us. We've been stalking this issue. If you need a petition to know how the buildings feel, I'll get you one because pretty much every resident is opposed to this. And we've got 400 residential units. And we're also mostly families. This is going to destroy our quality of life. And while this might be less important to some, it's important to us since these are our life investments. Our property values are going to tank because of this. So I have a couple of questions. The presentation that you made was all about the mobs coming to this. So this was an issue for us before COVID-19. Now that we're in a global pandemic, how on earth can you move crowds from an area where there's no residential buildings to two that exist currently and one that's in development, where we have to battle crowds just to walk to Dwayne Reed in normal circumstances? It's going to be a security nightmare for our building. We don't have an overnight doorman. Is the New York Stock Exchange going to pay for that too? This is just a disaster. If you see all the pictures during daytime are wonderful with all the crowds behaving nicely. At night, the naked people, the drunk people, the revelers, they're going to be coming into our building, and that is absolutely not acceptable. Is all of that worth it for the New York Stock Exchange to be able to get some more Instagram tags? Come on.
Okay. Ed, do you want to respond or should we keep going? Okay, let's just keep going. I have John. I don't have a second name. John?
Hi, this is John Weitzer. I too am a resident of 15 Broad, and I echo everything that Linda said. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I echo everything that Linda has said. And for me, the presentation tonight was one big contradiction, right? We're concerned about crowds. We've heard about potential terrorist acts. And yet, when we talk about where the proposed place to put it, right in front of two residential buildings, all of a sudden we're saying, well, the crowds are not that bad. 2 feet away from the curb is not that bad. Well, we're only concerned about terrorist attacks where someone's going to drive into a crowd. So right now, I know we talked earlier about the Fearless Girl had been moved, the crowds. There are crowds there. I have small children. I can't even walk to the right, my wife and I, to the right of the building as it stands today because of Federal Hall and the Fearless Girl and the crowds that accumulate there. Now I won't be able to walk to the left either. The Exchange Place street is a garbage pickup street as well. So it's difficult, the smell, to go down that street. And that's going to pretty much be the only outlet to get out of that area. So I share all the concerns, and I thank the committee members for mentioning the residents, because I feel like the presentation was void of any concern for the residents. It talked about tourists, pedestrian safety, and that was it. And this is now a residential area. It's not what it was in 1989. Many of the buildings are now converted to residential, and we have to recognize that. We're not putting it back into the same environment that it was in 1989. It's 2020. It's a residential neighborhood, and that needs to be taken into consideration more than it has been. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Angel Carrigal.
Thank you. I just want to say that you guys are doing a great job, and it's a pleasure to be here. My biggest concern, again, as a resident of 15 Broad, is the crowd noise, and how that would affect our way of living here. And to me, it's a no-brainer. You move the bull back 20, 30 yards, and you're right there in the park. Thank you very much, and you guys are doing a fantastic job.
We'd like to hear that. Thank you. Okay, let's keep going. And as the speakers go, just introduce who you are, if you're a resident or where you're from. Pete.
You might be. I don't know if you will be. You might well be.
Peter Allen, are you around?
Yes, yeah, speaking. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, now we do.
I'm also a resident of 15 Broad. Hi, Angel. It's good to hear you guys are doing well. I haven't seen you a little bit because of this COVID business, but glad everyone is doing well. Thanks a lot to everybody on the community board who seem to have thought long and hard about the implications of this move. And I think made really right down the line excellent points. I reiterate all of those. I think that this move would be a terrible, terrible mistake for the people who live on this street, which is no longer a bunch of office towers and people that only came to work. We live here, and we came here at a time after 9/11 when the city really encouraged people to come and move down here, and we did, and we've staked a claim, and here we are. And this is a residential street. 20 Broad and 15 Broad are all residential buildings. There's well over 1,000 residential people living on this street. Nobody came and asked any of us whether it would be a good idea to move the bull here. And although the bull is a wonderful statue, the issue really is you've already got the stock exchange, you've already got Federal Hall here, which in of itself is a huge tourist attraction and symbolic target as we're talking about terrorism. And to add just one more thing here is very thoughtless. And I think somebody said it, the gentleman who was a historian of the streetscapes, this seems very, very lazy. It just seemed like there was a problem where the bull is now for traffic issues, and people thought, well, we'll just put it over there. And the street is no longer that kind of street where you can just throw it there. And in fact, it's a nationally important street where the Bill of Rights was signed, where the first president was sworn in. And really a lot of thought should be given to how to make this street itself all that it can be, rather than just throwing, one more problem onto it that hasn't really been thought through, and that's just going to create new problems here, as already the traffic density is way, way too high. And I'd much rather have the energy spent thinking about how to really utilize what we've got, the stock exchange, the Federal Hall, all of those things, and make it what a world-class city would do, rather than just sort of lazily and thoughtlessly throw one more problem onto this block. So thank you very much, guys, and I really appreciate the thought that many of you have given to it.
Thank you. Next, Anthony Kovic.
Hi there. Thank you, Mr. Goldstein. I appreciate the allowance. Let me speak for a couple of minutes. I want to echo my fellow residents at 15 Broad. I also am a resident of the building. And all the points that were raised tonight were very valid. I'm not going to repeat them because they were all very true. I just wanted to sort of bring up another angle to this whole thing. Lower Manhattan is really known for its financial district. And I think the bull, where it is, kind of symbolizes an entrance from a different angle of the financial district. By having it brought onto Broad Street, where the New York Stock Exchange is, Federal Hall is, and the Fearless Girl, like everyone else said, it's just putting all the eggs in one basket, which I think is a wrong move. From a residential perspective, like everyone else said, if we have 500 to 1,000 residents living on the same street facing that area, I just think we're looking for more and more problems. So the terrorism discussion or angle will never work, because you can take some kind of lunatic to come with a backpack one day and cause more damage than people can imagine. So I just feel that if people are looking for options, I know that Mr. Ed Pincar said that you guys have thought of many, many options throughout the whole area. Have you considered, for example, on Wall Street, between Broadway and Broad, or on Nassau Street between Wall Street and Pine, or on Wall Street between Broad and William, where all the bollards are really established, so there's no potential danger of any vehicle traffic coming to hurt people. At least those locations don't have residential towers with buildings with entrances right beside them. Now, in all fairness, I didn't consider utilities, gas, Con Edison. I didn't consider that whatsoever. That's a fair point. But I'm just saying that going back to I think Tammy brought the point of bringing the bull back 30 or 40 yards. Why not even consider into the plaza of the North American Indian Museum, where there's a huge plaza there, and that could be a consideration to bring tourists to that area as well, and spread out the wealth of the whole financial district, because the charging bull does represent the entire financial district, not just the New York Stock Exchange. Thank you. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Chair
Okay.
Goldstein, just to answer that point, we did consider a variety of locations, and I'm happy to try to put together, a summary to share with board leadership. It's not only the utilities, Wall Street itself is narrower than Broad Street. We have to consider the way that fire vehicles are able to navigate. There is a laundry list of technical reasons. So I certainly, I hear the great feedback and the important feedback we're getting from all of you tonight. But a lot goes into what a potential site could be. And if this isn't one that you prefer, that's entirely your right. But there's a tremendous effort undertaken by multiple agencies to see what type of spot would be able to satisfy all of the competing interests and needs.
Okay, thank you. David Athay?
Hello. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, great. I'm also a resident at 15 Broad Street, and thank you for having this forum tonight so I could add my 2 cents to it. I think putting it on Broad Street could be an option, but it's the wrong option. I think they're just kind of saying on a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, does it meet all these requirements? And they just say yes, and let's just put it here. And they're not taking into consideration all the other factors that go into it. One of them being that anytime any kind of destination or landmark, not only does it bring the tourists that come along with it, but it also brings the vendors along with it and the food carts that come along with it. And so now you've created this mini microcosm of things that are being caused by that one area. And that's something else to consider besides just the fact that it's a safer location, but it's not necessarily the correct location for what it needs and what it deserves to be. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. And now we have Michael B.
Hi, thank you very much. I really appreciate everything you put together, CB1, on this. And I also am a resident at 15 Broad, and I echo my fellow residents' comments. One thing that's been left out is we've mentioned 15 Broad, we've mentioned 20 Broad. There's also 25 Broad, which is residential. There's also the Sky, which is residential. There's also Lamont School, obviously. A lot of residential and local folks will be impacted by this. To the point that was just made by my fellow resident before about traffic on the streets and all the unintended consequences that haven't been discussed here with bringing outside vendors and other hanger-ons into the area. We're already challenged, I mean, the New York Stock Exchange is one of the top tourist sites already in the city. We're not Times Square, and in fact, I think we're starting to look a lot more like Times Square, which is, I don't think, what CB1, the residents, or really what the governing bodies want. One other thing I would say is that already with the crowds, this area is only serviced in terms of deliveries, in terms of move out, move ins, garbage by Broad Street and Exchange Street. And to the extent that, as another resident pointed out, the crowds will increase here, and they're already a problem of just tourists getting in the way with traffic. If it's truly an idea to reduce the possibility of somebody getting injured and also making sure that we can be serviced, those crowds are just going to make life more complicated for everybody in this area. And I know CB1 in prior meetings and also in prior years, this has come up constantly, a number of occasions about the problematic nature of these side streets and the amount of garbage, the serviceability of them. I just don't understand how all this extra work and extra requirements are really workable in the area. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Kenneth Berger. Kenneth?
You're unmuted if you'd like to speak.
Well, all right. If he's not responding, I guess we could go, we could go to Shelley Restogi.
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, hi. I'm also a resident of 15 Broad. You can tell that most of the non-board members are residents of 15 Broad, so we obviously care about this a lot. I think you guys have done a phenomenal job in unearthing a lot of the problems that have arisen in this selection process. But I think I'd like to understand a little bit more what the decision criteria were to evaluate these various other locations, utilities, safety obviously are important ones, but I think there's been some interesting proposals where, keeping largely in the same location, but back 34 yards, as Angel and other co-residents have mentioned, makes a tremendous amount of sense, especially since there's that cobblestone area right at the back in front of the museum. Anyway, thank you for hosting this call. Appreciate your patience in such a long call, but you can tell we're very interested in preserving the safety and security of our neighborhood.
Thank you, Shelley. Okay, Kenneth, are you back or can we move on? Okay. That is the last speaker that I have. So at this stage, I think it's time for the committee to decide how we're going to proceed here.
Sorry to interrupt. I have Alejandra here. If I didn't catch her before, she's just chatted me. Let me just find her on the list.
Okay.
You, Alejandra, you should be all set.
Okay, I'm Alejandra Cata. I am the president of 3 Hanover Square. And many of the residents, although our co-op is a couple of blocks away, they've reached out very concerned over the impact this is going to have to our neighborhood and to our safety. And I know one of the concerns that they had is why the DOT is focusing on an issue like this. And there was budget concerns. I know that this is going to be paid with private funds, but there's been mention of a lawsuit. And is that lawsuit also going to be covered by private funds when the artist sues DOT and the city for their actions? Also, DOT's time and focus cost money. We have concerns for our safety. There are many threats that the stock exchange has had. I would like to know from the sergeant, because those are numerous, how many of those have there been? They don't seem to be able to tell us a number on threats or incidents or potential incidents in the current location. And then the other issue is that they continuously showed images of people surrounding the bull. So 2 feet from the curb is not necessarily sufficient distance for the residents of 20 Broad Street. I have a friend that lives there. They were not advised. She could not be on this call. They are outraged. There's 433 residential units in that building. When you have crowds completely surrounding their entrance, this poses a security threat. And lastly, another point that has not been raised yet is with all these crowds, with all these attractions, you have all of these tourists congregating. How are fire trucks and police officers and any emergency service vehicles going to access these buildings when now we have a larger influx of people surrounding that area? In its current location, as it was mentioned before, there is a pattern of movement. So the tourists they move more. It's a more fluid situation. I fear that having it on a highly high threat area as the stock exchange is truly negligent. And the attempts at solution at the current location for safety have truly been underwhelming. I really think the city, the NYPD and DOT can do a lot better than what they've tried so far. They are insufficient at most, so using them as an example of what they've tried is laughable. I'm sorry. And thank you so much for your time. And I sympathize with all my neighbors that live in the area, and I share in their concerns.
Okay, thank you. We do have a couple of other speakers. Edward Adams.
Edward, you're unmuted.
Edward's not there. Maybe we'll go on and come back to him. We have Karen Giannicola.
Hi, thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak. I'm a resident of Broad Street as well, and I echo the comments of Linda and Angel and the others. A couple quick things during this conference call. I've already gone ahead and I've emailed Stacy Cunningham, who's the president of the New York Stock Exchange. She and I have had a couple of exchanges before, so I just sent her a very nice note asking her, I'm a 9/11 survivor, so, and I'm sure other people on the call are. So as a 9/11 survivor, that trumps everything in many ways. We can't increase the risk of terrorism. So I have a couple of thoughts. I get why you want to move the bull. That's fine. I think we can find a nice place for it, just not at my doorstep. It should be, Stacy Cunningham wants it, who I think she's a great leader. It could be at their doorstep. Are they going to give, to Linda Gersman's point, are they going to give us increased security? My life is at stake here. It's not just moving a piece of artwork, it's increasing a possibility for terrorism. And the sergeant who was speaking earlier, from my understanding, the NYPD doesn't agree with this. That's going to look really bad I'm in marketing and media and PR. It's not going to look too good in the headline in the public press. It's going to be a disaster. Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. I see I got a message from Michael Muir. Do we have him ready to speak?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, members of the community board, for giving us a forum. Not going to surprise anyone here, but I'm another resident of 15 Broad Street. Nice to hear from my neighbors who I haven't seen in a little while. Ed, thanks for the presentation. I sympathize with the public safety concerns, but honestly, I think this falls woefully short. To John's point earlier, there was a whole presentation there with a lot of concern for visitors and tourists, and not one single word about the residents. The residents of this area didn't come up once until Paul asked what building entrance it was close to and whether you made an attempt to inform anyone. And as a board member in this building, I can say we were not informed or this wasn't discussed with us at all. I'd like to particularly thank Elizabeth, Mark, and Joe for speaking on behalf of the residents and bringing this up early. This is just a matter of safety for the folks who live in the building and who live in the neighborhood. This area is loaded with young families. And I think to Elizabeth's point, we're drastically underplaying how congested the area gets. And the idea that putting it on the west side of the street keeps residents of our building out of or away from being impacted is just flat out wrong. I wouldn't point to Fearless Girl as a huge success. Someone brought up that that it hadn't created problems, and I would beg to differ. My 2-year-old son was knocked to the ground so hard he cracked his head on the concrete by somebody who was running to get a picture with Fearless Girl. That's a pretty serious safety concern. And as a father, I dread the crowds that the charging bull would attract. I really am quite displeased about the way that this plan was put together, and I remain deeply concerned at the lack of consideration for the folks who live in the neighborhood.
Okay, thanks. Okay, is there anyone else from the public who I did not call on who still wants to speak?
We have Edward Adams, who I think is ready to go now, and then we have Andy Fox, and then Mariama James would like to speak again.
Okay, so let's go in that order. Edward Adams, you're up.
Hi, can you hear me? Yes. Fantastic. I too am a resident of 15 Broad Street. Please don't hold it against me. I just wanted to ask the commissioner one question. The space within the frozen zone around the New York Stock Exchange that is the biggest open space is at the corner of Wall and Broad. You could place the statue either on the sidewalk in front of 23 Wall Street, which has been vacant for over 8 years now. You could place it in the street proper. You could place it inside the fencing that is in front of the New York Stock Exchange and have it displayed in conjunction with the exchange. Was that location of that corner given any consideration? And if it was, tell me why that wasn't your top option.
It absolutely was considered. Again, we ran into conflicts with FDNY turning radius as well as underground utilities.
Thanks.
Okay. Mariama, I know you want to go. Who was the last public speaker that you had, Diana?
Andy Fox.
Hello,
You
can you
on
hear
the
me?
Yeah.
I am. I would like to announce that I am not a resident of Broad Street, but a concerned citizen for a little variation. It was mentioned before that this location is where the Bill of Rights was signed. It's where the first president was sworn in. It's a historic street. It's part of what in the United States counts as ancient history, a meaningful location in the 18th century in history of the Republic. And to move the sculpture there creates the impression that that street is only about the stock exchange. It is a works to a kind of stock exchange ghetto where all the capitalist stock exchange energy is sequestered. From a certain point of view, anyway, it might be seen that way. And I think that when dealing with a national resource like this, a little more thought needs to be put into the general symbolic valence, if you will, of the action. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mariama.
Thank you. I was just wondering if maybe since the 15th, when it's gotten warmer and more of the city and the state has opened up, has anybody, like monitored the crowds to see? Because some of us have gotten sort of used to standing in line and distancing and not being on top of each other. And maybe if we give this a little time and look at it, you may feel differently about what exactly is necessary here in terms of moving it or crowd issues and the whole lot of it. If no one's looked at it since COVID, I think that if it's possible, it might be a good idea to set the whole project aside until there's been time to see what the area is going to be like, what's going to happen with public tourist attractions in general in terms of spacing and waiting to get to view them.
Thank you. Anyone else? Diana?
That's all I have. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, let's keep going then. All right, let me see if I could start to wrap up and open further discussion. Obviously, there's been a lot of concerns raised about this move, mainly based on two reasons. One, we heard from quite a few residents of the new proposed location who feel that it would be very detrimental to them and their lifestyle and their safety and a whole range of issues that you heard. And then the second issue was that there seems to be many people who would prefer to try to come up with a solution that keeps Charging Bowl basically nearby where it is, and while addressing the legitimate safety problems, many of which have been raised by Ed and others. And so those were the two main statements that I heard. I didn't hear too many people in support of the move. So do we want to basically say we're opposed and here's the reasons and we'd like to continue talking about it and come up with better solutions, something along those lines? I open it up to the committee.
Yes. Paul, this one.
Who said that? Okay.
Wendy.
Wendy, did you?
I agree.
You agree?
I agree as well. I think even the move itself needs to be reconsidered, particularly with the options that Tammy and Laura and Rosa have suggested that could make that location a bit safer.
This is Rosa. I agree.
It's Kathy. I agree also.
Well, this is Mark. Yeah, I also agree. I think the resolution should basically encompass, and first and foremost, about the process, the flawed initial process of not reaching out to the residents. And then the second half about everything that was said about why you should stay and the problematic problems of actually the location. But this is always kind of what government does sometimes, throw out something against the wall that's a little bit absurd. And then when everyone complains, they'll come back with something else that we think that they're being reasonable when not necessarily was always the plan. So, but I think it should in two parts. The process with not reaching out to the residents, and then all the issues that were talked about, that terrorism is not necessarily a concern, perhaps moving it back a little bit, reimagining the park, everything that was said by basically 99% of the residents and board members. Thank you.
Kathy, did you want to say something? Okay.
Kathy.
Hey, Paul, it's Andrew. I just want to clarify. We're expressing concern and/or opposition to the proposed relocation, or the proposed site for the relocation. But are we also saying we're opposed to moving it from where it currently is? I'm not sure I followed that.
Well, I think we were interested in exploring nearby other locations that were relatively close to Bowling Green. And maybe we could clarify that a little bit. I thought when I had spoken to Wendy earlier, to Tammy earlier, that we were talking about that cobblestone area adjacent to the Museum for the American Indian, Smithsonian, which is a big open area. Again, I don't know, there are subway entrances around there that may not work. But
Paul, I'm sorry to interrupt. It's Elizabeth. Can we ask them to disclose what locations they did consider, so that we're not reinventing the wheel, and then go from there and suggest additional sites?
Sure.
Not disclose to us the actual locations that they already investigated, but we should ask them to disclose those so we know what they've ruled out and why.
I think that's a great idea, Liz. Thanks.
Paul, I heard more of a tenor of, even though these are certainly considerations, and but more of a tenor of not moving it. I heard it several times. People said the majesty of the location and how iconic it looks with the park in the background, and these sort of descriptions. So I think we should weigh on the side of that. I thought what I heard was not moving it, but just tangentially mention, oh well, are there other locations, just to let us know, as opposed to saying where else we can move it.
I agree, Mark. I think the priority should be prioritizing making it work in that location, and only if we rule out the ability to make it work in that location. And Laura's points about, the different ways of managing the crowd control, or even if you have to keep it there, if not push it back, managing that space better. That needs to be.
That's good, Liz, that's good language. Prioritize leaving it in that location should be the wording in the resolution. That's very good.
Okay, are most people okay with that being our lead ask?
Yes, because am I allowed to chime in if I'm not? Just quickly, there's all sorts of bollards and security barriers that are attractive, that are all over the city now that can manage this. And, the idea of prioritizing the few cars that go there over the millions of people, the pedestrians, that part of the city is really about the pedestrian experience, and that, with not much work, they could adapt that location.
I hope we're not suggesting closing the street to vehicular traffic, because that's a whole other can of worms. We'll be here for another hour debating that. That's not, I hope we're not saying that.
Okay, you guys can wordsmith it. I'm just saying, in my experience, there's a lot of ways to make that a safer and more attractive pedestrian experience where it is right now.
With vehicular traffic.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Mark, let's hear from some others. Are most people comfortable with that being our lead ask to try to make the current site continue to be the home of Charging Bull, but with adequate addressing of these safety and et cetera concerns?
Without knowing what those might be, Paul, I wouldn't feel comfortable making I wouldn't feel comfortable making that statement at this point. I just don't know that that's feasible. I think the wording can be somewhat more neutral than that, but that's just my view.
Okay, and anyone else? I just want to get through this point.
This is Richard. I think that's the right way to go. It's certainly the sentiment of the general sentiment of the committee, and I think that's what we've asked them to do, is to come back and look at other alternatives where in and around where it is now before continuing with this recommendation.
Yeah, I think it's critical that they provide a reason, an absolute bona fide, unequivocal reason why this has to be done and why it has to go where it has to go. And so many people wisely pointed out that this sort of bull that's running in all directions is a clear example of it not being positioned in anywhere that really we all fully are behind or understand. So I think it's fair to identify all of the incredibly thoughtful community's concerns, from things I never thought of, the overcrowding with the food carts, the fact that there was no public outreach, the entry to FIDI as a kind of symbolic gesture, all these things that were said, which I assume are recorded, should be all the things that the department needs to go back and think about. And there's certainly no rush here. That's the part that's, right. I think we all agree there's no need to, have to, to relocate this bull in the next month or 6 months. So, I hope we can get a pretty comprehensive series of why there was, some pushback.
Okay, I still am not clear. All right, let me just take a survey. How many people want to go on record saying that we would like to try to keep the bull near or at Bowling Green, provided that adequate safety measures can be handled? All right, let me just go down the list. Andrew, you said no.
I was to say, Paul, at the risk of interrupting, and I'm so sorry, this is Wendy again. I just had the thought that the proposal that's being put before us is to put it on, this new location. Can we just reject the proposal and not get into all the nitty gritty? I mean, do we have to solve the problem other than we don't support?
Start with that.
I guess
There was a sentiment to keep it where it is overwhelming. So.
All right.
I understand that, but I think that the proposal is the site, and we can just say, we have a problem with the aesthetics, we have a problem with the safety, we have the problem of even which direction it should go. We're rejecting the proposal, and we're not solving the other problem.
I thought we went over that already. That's going to be part of covered in the resolution. I want to prioritize it, saying residents aren't notified, and there's problems with the location anyway. There's no reason why all that can't be mentioned. And it was.
But that's what you stick to. You give all those reasons for why the proposal doesn't work. We don't have to go into, it should go near or a few feet back or a list of all the other sites. Just that, what you brought to us doesn't work.
I don't see why we can't. Those were discussed thoroughly, and there are sentiments of a lot of board members. Tammy's idea can be asked to be looked into. We need to be on the record. Most people said it should actually stay where it is. So those should be incorporated into resolution, not just rejecting it if we don't like where it is. So I strongly disagree that that those other issues and points should not be included.
All right. Does anyone else want to weigh in on that? Kathy Gupta, what do you think?
All of the above. I think we should reach location, particularly we should mention the flawed process, not consulting with the residents in the community. And I agree with Mark, all the different options and suggestions for keeping it where it is in a more viable way would be, a good thing to mention. So.
Okay, let's keep going. Joe Lerner, do you have any comments? All right, we'll come back to Joe. Rosa Chang.
I think the safety concern is a real one that we do need to address. And so I'm not sure that the precise location there is ideal, but something in and around that very vicinity is, I think, crucial to us. And the proposed location is an absolute no.
Wendy, you seem to not want to go there. And Richard, you see?
It's not that I don't agree with it. I actually agree that we shouldn't, I don't think that in the age of COVID, this is going to be a problem for a long time. I see no rush to do any of it. But I guess the difference is that I'd want them to, come back after hearing all the reasons why we rejected their proposal. And, anyway, it doesn't matter. I'm fine if the committee wants to list everything.
Let me just get feedback from the two public members. Richard Korman. Richard, you still here? Okay, David Shelton, how about you? Okay, I guess we're losing a few people. Okay.
Sorry, Paul, just to clarify, Andrew. So my position is I absolutely support looking at alternatives. I would be opposed to making a statement to keep it where it is.
All right, it seemed like the committee was sort of divided on that one. Okay.
Do you have me off mute?
What, David, you up?
I would like to repeat that we should request the other sites that they studied.
Okay.
That might save us a lot of time. I would be really interested to know how many they looked at.
Yeah, I agree.
And while we're at it, we might see what they found in its present location that would make nearby not be acceptable.
I mean, can't this be a real resolution, Paul, that records what was said tonight, which is simply that at this point we are not agreeing with the relocation, that we are asking for additional information, that we've recorded the community concern, and that we'd like to better understand where they're coming from in the future, design. I mean, I'm not sure why we have to go further than that. I mean, we're basically saying not this, then let's see what else you've got. Is that not?
That's exactly how I feel, Alice.
But there was an sentiment to prioritize, keep it where it is. And we also need to mention that the artist was also opposed to moving it as well.
Yeah, I agree.
I have a question about that. If I put a sculpture out on the sidewalk, do I get to tell the city it can't move it?
Well, I would just say that it was done illegally at first, but then they did come to a legal agreement to relocate it that all the parties at the time did sign off on. So, yes, I think that's the best answer I could give you.
Maybe the only one there is. Okay.
Oh, here we go.
Right. All right, so we just basically want to reject it. Is that what I'm hearing? Do we want to say anything about coming back to the community and the community board, anything like that?
We should always say that. That's kind of standard on this kind of thing, I think.
Okay. All right.
Paul, this is Richard. I'm still on. I sort of lost the connection here for a minute. I still think, I know it's easier not to say so, but I still think the strong sentiment was to have the DOT work to try to keep it in and near its current location. I mean, that was the strong sentiment here, and I think we should be saying that.
I think we agreed to say that, right?
Yeah.
Elizabeth's language?
Yeah, I have no problem with that.
And I missed that, sorry. It must have been when I got lost here.
All right, Diana, you and I can work on wording this, hopefully, and then, okay, any further comments on what we need to do, or are we ready to vote?
We're ready to vote. It's 8:20.
I'm ready if you guys are. Anyone else, or, okay. You get the gist of it. Diana, do you want to call the roll?
Yeah, I'm gonna do a roll call vote. Paul Goldstein, Andrew Zelter,
Can you hear me?
yeah.
I'm opposed.
Mark Amoruso,
Yes.
Tom Burton. I don't think he's on. Alice Blank, Rosa Chang. Was that a yes?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes,
That
thank
was
you.
a yes.
Wendy Chapman,
Yes.
Kathy Gupta,
Yes.
Elizabeth Lemire,
Yes.
Joe Lerner,
Joe, this is Lucian. Joe spoke to me on the phone. He said he approves of. He said you vote yes to a resolution to not move the ball.
okay, so that's an in favor. Colin Mahoney, I don't think he is on. Dennis Mihalski. Okay, they're not on. Bob Townley, I saw him earlier. I don't know if he's still on. Bob Townley,
I think he left.
okay. Richard Korman
Yes.
and David Sheldon.
David, unmute yourself, or someone unmute him.
David, I think
Yes.
yes? Okay, the motion carries. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, very good. Let's see if we could move quickly on one other item that we have. I'll give you a little time to put up the resolution, but I could give a little background. The issue is face masks in parks and open spaces. The genesis of this was from Hudson River Park Trust Advisory Council or Board, whatever they're called. And they apparently passed a few resolutions asking for, among other things, that more be done to get people to wear face masks at Hudson River Park. So that's how it started, and Bob Townley brought it up. But I have put together a resolution that basically says that we've been told by state, city, and federal officials to wear face masks, especially when coming in closer contact with others outdoors, and that we have other parks in the area and other esplanades and other areas that are also becoming crowded, and obviously we don't want to spread this. So the gist of the resolution is, but you could go through it and I could read it if you want, if that's easier. But it basically,
You can't see the whole resolution.
let me go to the therefore be it resolves.
Can we just go through it for a minute? I mean, can we read it?
You want me to read it?
Well, or we can read it. Can you just go back to the first page, Diana, and just let us scroll down somehow?
I'll give you a couple of minutes to thumb through it and take a look.
Can't get to the bottom, the therefore be it resolved part.
Oh, there we go. Oh, can you just go up. Well, anyway, whatever.
Stay on page one for till Alice is done.
No, it's fine. I just don't know what I didn't. Yeah, just right there. Sorry. Let me just quickly. Okay. Thank you.
Continue.
All right, let's see the results.
Yep.
Sorry?
We should have some music in the background for this.
Well, go for it. All right, so are we ready to discuss or possibly take a vote?
I would take the vote.
Discuss.
I have something to say about this.
Yeah, I do too.
All right, let's go to the comments.
Can I go?
Go ahead.
Can I go? No.
All right, Mark, you could go first.
Okay. I'm completely opposed to this resolution, and I think we should table it or just withdraw it. We should not be in the business of, no, there's been very little discussions in New York City about people's civil liberties being violated, women being thrown to the ground by the cops with babies with them and things like this. The ambiguity of these rules, and they're not even laws. They are questionably whether the governors even have these powers, and they're drunk with them now. None of our elected officials are even talking about how civil liberties are being violated. Those are the real violations. There's no such thing as a violating social distance rules. You know, what the hell does that mean? You're 5.5 feet from someone, you're supposed to get a summons, but you're 6 feet, you're not. We should not be in the business of saying we're requesting to mandate people to wear masks. It's a complete, absolute violation of people's civil liberties, and we should absolutely just withdraw this resolution. We should not be dealing with this.
All right, are you making a motion to table?
I withdraw it. I mean, table, yes. I'll withdraw it.
Second that motion? Okay, I don't hear a second, so let's continue. Richard Korman.
Yeah, I partially agree with Mark. I'm not going to comment on the civil liberties part because I do think that in emergency cases there are sacrifices to civil liberties. But the idea of enforcement is very problematic, and requesting. I think Hudson River Park Trust has already seemed to have abandoned the idea that they're able to enforce it. I know that they've gone out and been discussing with their staff about the staff volunteering to go around and ask people to put on masks or to stay apart, which I think are going to put people in risk situations, which is inappropriate. I think that the problem is enforcement, and there needs to be other thought, other ways of doing it. I was reading today, Brad Lander had some recommendations about giving masks to people, making it a positive thing instead of an enforced thing. And so the idea of, I support the idea of having a mask. I don't want to get this thing. I don't want to give it to anybody. But the enforcement has become clearly problematic, as Mark pointed out. And anytime anyone mentions it to people, I hear arguments. It gets ugly. It's not right to put people in those situations. And I think that there are other ways of handling it. So that's my first point. And my second point, and if we're going to do a resolution, we should do it in some positive way instead of a negative enforcement. And my other point is that the second, therefore be it resolved, is entirely unrelated to this in terms of closing streets. That's a very problematic issue that was heavily debated and rejected in large measure at CB2. And I think it requires a lot more discussion and shouldn't be part of this resolution if we pass this at all.
Okay. There's any other comments?
It's Kathy, Paul. There was a very intense conversation about this at the last Battery City Committee meeting. We have probably 70% of the joggers not wearing masks, and there's not enough space for people, they're coming very close. And I've had on recent walks, people come within a foot of me, sweating, panting, no, just nothing. And I'm a high risk person. So, I don't know that they need to be handing out tickets, but something has to happen for crowd control or public education or just, people who do, enforcement, not just standing there looking at it. And what I saw today when I went out is a lot of people quietly sitting on benches doing their work or talking on their phones, no masks. But it's so narrow, you can't get beyond 2 feet of them to just go by. So I don't know what the solution is, but certainly, asking for more management situation is appropriate at this time. I mean, people have civil liberties to stay alive too.
Paul, I'm not on this committee, but I just shared an article. The NYPD is no longer enforcing the wearing of masks. As of the 15th, the governor's major order expired on that day. And from then, he's been saying that if you can't maintain social distancing, he's asking that you wear a mask, but you do not have to. And many people have removed them as of the 15th. But there's the article there showing that NYPD is no longer going to enforce this.
How about if we put in language something like, CB would like to urge officials to take steps to encourage the use of face masks in Hudson River parks and other open spaces.
Paul, can we add
think
some
that's
language
good.
about making them available? I saw over at the East River Esplanade, there were some officials handing out masks.
Yeah.
They also are handing them out in Hudson River Park and the Battery. I actually received them. I don't think many.
I
Well,
think that's
I
a
think that's a
positive way
much
to
better
go.
way to go. Encourage people.
Right. I agree,
And
Richard. Stick with the
worry
policy.
about the mentally ill too, because they already get harassed, and we need to gently encourage people to protect themselves and others. And
Right.
if you aggressively go after, you could have a bad situation.
Right.
Right.
Paul, what about this language? I saw language in the resolution when it popped in front of us. Require mandatory enforcement violation. Is all this verbiage still going to be in there?
Okay, so I changed the second resolve to read, the CB would like to see officials take steps to make masks more available and to encourage the use of face masks, et cetera, in Hudson River Park and other parks, particularly those that draw large crowds. Is that
Yep.
good with most people?
Well, what about that language in there that said mandatory enforcement and all that, and that therefore be resolves? I thought I saw them.
See what we could do about that. CB1 supports and encourages HRPT and city and state to encourage instead of mandate, right?
It is not in front of us, the language anymore.
All right, I'll read it to you. All right, so it reads that CB1 supports and encourages the HRPT and the city and state to encourage, maybe we have to change one of those encourage, to encourage the wearing of face masks in all parks and open spaces in Lower Manhattan and throughout. And then we have the other, be it resolved, that I read earlier. What, do you want to say anything about closing more streets or let that go?
What do you mean?
Richard, I would let that go. It's not anywhere part of the whereas, and it requires much more discussion in my view.
The executive committee is going to take up that issue anyway. They're going to look at closing off the easternmost lane of the West Side Highway Route 9A and tell the bicyclists and possibly the joggers, I'm not sure, to use that space. They want to consider separating the groups. So I don't know. We're going to look at that in the executive.
Actually, Paul, I think it's the westernmost lane.
That's the Western.
Thank you. You're right.
Hey, Paul, I meant to ask about that. Why is that not in our committee here and instead of executive? Shouldn't we be looking at that since it's related to the park? What happened there?
I think because we have a transportation committee now, so I guess transportation issues generally go to that committee. That committee already met this month. So, I mean, I said I could try to tackle it here, but there was a decision made to try to just do it at exec. So that's the story.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so I'm gonna is everyone all right if I just remove that last be it resolved?
Sounds good, Paul.
All right.
Thank you.
So with those changes, are we ready for a vote?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Diana, do you need a roll call again?
I will do a roll call. I just love hearing everybody's voices. I don't get to see any of you anymore, so I'm just going to do it even if I don't have to. Paul Goldstein,
Yes.
Andrew Zelter,
Yes.
Mark Cameruso,
No.
Alice Frank,
And I put myself there, Diana. Hi, and thank you, everybody. Good night.
Alice, Rosa Chang,
Yes.
Wendy Chapman,
Yes.
Kathy Gupta,
Yes.
Liz Lamia,
Yes.
Joe Lerner. Let's see. I see his name on the list. Joe, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. An emphatic yes. Colin Mahoney, Dennis, Bob Townley, Tom Burton, Richard Korman,
Yes.
and David Sheldon. Okay, motion carries. Thank you.
All right, group.
Good, Diana.
Thank you all. Sorry it went so long, but I think we did our job.
Mm-hmm. Good job.
So thank you, and we'll see you next week, I guess. Many of you.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Good evening.
Good night.
Paul, take care, everybody.
You too. Thanks all. Thank you.